All right, AP Stats, I wanted to take some time and make another review resource that I think will be helpful based on some conversations I've had with you the past week. It's just about diagnosing the short answer questions and really figuring out what type of question it is, like what unit it comes from. So I'm going to try to do that here. I'm not going to be as explicit as the AP is breaking it down, but I'm going to look at chapter 1 and 2. It's exploring data. It's one variable. So this would be like any kind of graphs, box plots, dot plots, stem plots, histograms for quantitative, or bar graphs, segmented bar graphs, mosaic plots for categorical. Two variable would be anything with expressions. What am I saying? Regression, like scatter plots, residuals. Collecting data, that's going to be anything with sampling, experimentation. Probability, random variables, probability distributions. This is tree diagrams, two-way tables, geometric, binomial, discrete, continuous random variables. Sampling distributions is just that, sampling distributions. Inference for proportions, inference for means, inference for chi-squared, and inference for slopes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 2013, 14, and 15 AP exam free response questions and just buzz through questions and classify them as what type of question it is and give you hints about how to attack the question without actually doing them, in hopes that you can watch this video and feel comfortable seeing a question and really knowing what the concept is. So here goes. I think I'm starting with 2015. All right. Yep. So question 1, I see box plots. Immediately I'm thinking exploring data, one variable. Comparing distributions, this is Visco plus context. And then it's saying why might I choose corporation A? Why might I choose corporation B? This is getting into probably the Visco plus context, maybe a little bit deeper, some features of the graph. Okay, question number 2. All right, I see confidence interval. I see convincing statistical evidence. I see P for proportion. So to me, this is inference for a proportion. Proportion, conditions met. This is inference for a proportion. Maybe a one proportion z-test, z-interval, something along those lines. That's what I'm looking at here. Third question. What is the probability? Probability. Expected values of mean, expected values of mean. Probability. This is a question dealing with probability. More specifically, this is a discrete random variable. So if I want the expected value, it'd be like 0 times 0.15 plus 1 times 0.21 plus 2 times 0.4, et cetera, et cetera. So this would be probability. Question 4, convincing statistical evidence. This is a test. Let us see. Reduce the chance. Chance sounds like it's like a proportion. Let's see. At the end of 6 years, 15 people who took the low-dose aspirin had developed colon cancer. So they did or they didn't. This is proportions. And then you have, let's see, you have two groups. You have the people who took the low-dose aspirin and people who took the placebo. This is going to be a two proportion Z test. Two proportion Z test. So the inference for proportions here. Question 5, I see a scatter plot. This is exploring data, two variables. This is dealing with regression analysis, like least squares regression line, residuals. Prediction, this is probably getting into residuals. Residual equals actual minus predicted. Okay, the investigative task, as we've talked about before, is going to incorporate all sorts of different aspects of the course. So part A, it's talking about, will the sample be representative? So this is talking about collecting data. Was it a random sample? Can you generalize to a population? Part B, which of the sampling methods do we want to use? So it's analyzing one variable, so exploring data, one variable. Now it's talking about less variable. Then in part D, sampling distribution. And then talking about the distribution, this looks like more sampling distributions, unbiased. And then there's going to be some things after part B that are going to be a little investigative that may not fit with a specific unit. Okay, so that's for 2015. Just quick analysis. I'm going to now move to another exam. So here it goes. All right, I see proportions. I see a bar graph, a few sentences summarizing, association. Okay, I don't see anything about, oh, I do on the next page see, I was going to say something about chi-squared because I saw association, right, and p-value. So we got a few things going on. The first part of this question is just dealing with calculating a proportion from a two-way table. This is just looking at that. Then we have a bar graph looking at an association. So part of this is exploring data, one variable, it's categorical variable. And then we get into this idea of an association. So we're looking at inference for chi-squared. And then we're looking at, it looks like part of a test and basing it off the p-value, what kind of conclusion should we draw? So just the conclude step of the four-step process. So there's a couple different things at play here. Number 2, calculate the probability. So we're looking at selecting men and women based on your answer to part A. So I explicitly have to talk about part A. Then we're talking about a simulation to estimate the probability. This is your probability question. Part 3, we have a normal distribution, or question 3. What's the probability that it'll lose some funding? This looks like a z-score, maybe, because they're talking about normally distributed. Then they get into this idea of we're going to take a sample of 3 days. So this starts to get into parts B and C, a sampling distribution, because now we're looking at a random sample bigger than just one. Question 4, I can see here that what's an advantage of using median rather than mean? That's going back to exploring data. Is the data skewed? Are there outliers impacting it? Something like that. Then in part B, we have different methods for collecting data. We're just going to send out an email. We're going to do a simple random sample. This is collecting data. Question 5, convincing evidence. This is a test. Tells me that right there. Now I need to think, is it categorical or quantitative? I see units. This is quantitative. Is there one group or two? There's 2 groups, men or women. Are they paired? I don't think so. The process, 8 selected car models. Yes, because for the same car model. So it's the same car model, they're paired. You have women and men. So this looks like a paired t-test. Paired t-test. Investigative task. All right, there's a scatter plot, so dealing with regression, exploring data 2 variables. So here you're calculating and interpreting a residual. It's residual actual minus predicted. Then we're using these scatter plots here to, looks like, analyze some things. Again, still that 2 variable. Comparing the association. So that's DOFs plus context, direction, outliers, form, and strength. And then we're starting to get into some more investigative stuff. He wants to improve his prediction. Let's look at one last exam, the 2013 exam. All right, I see a stem plot. That's quantitative. I see units. And this is exploring data 1 variable. Then we have a confidence interval for the mean. So if it's quantitative, it's the t distribution. So this would be a 1 sample t interval. Question number 2, I see some sampling method, bias. Then we're using a computer random number generator. Then in part C, I have stratified versus simple random. This is collecting data. That's what this question is talking about. Number 3, I see probability. And in part B, I see independence, and we're randomly selecting an egg. So this is your probability question. Part B specifically is random variables, like adding variances, potentially independent random variables, finding the mean and standard deviation. Part A just looks like a very simple z-score. Number 4, convincing evidence. This is a test. It's a 2-way table that tells me it's chi-squared, most likely. I'm looking at the distribution. It says association. So I'm leaning towards chi-squared test for independence, and it's one sample. So this is a chi-squared test for independence. Question 5, hypothesis test. I see some hypotheses here. So this is inference for proportions. That's what's happening here. Then they are simulating a distribution. This looks like a sampling distribution based on a simulation. So this is starting to get into probability a little bit. So this is inference for proportions and sampling distribution. The last question, number 6, comparing distributions. So again, I'm thinking Visco plus context. This is a time graph, not one of the typical ones that we've seen. So really, a shape is out. Outliers, I'd mention those if there was anything crazy, but it's going to be more about variability and center in terms of higher, lower, using comparative words. Describe how the frequency changed, just using the graph, general trends. Then we get into the investigative part. Calculate this 4-year moving average. Oh my goodness. Excuse me. So that's just something new and investigative. And then they're going back to this time plot. They also put the 4-year averages on here. What's something that's more or less apparent than the original graph? So that's into the investigative part. So just summarizing, what you should be able to do is get a good sense on what's being asked in these questions. On your gold packet, on the back of the gold packet, this is exactly from the College Board. Okay, you're going to have one question on collecting data, which is chapter 4. That's your different types of sampling methods: stratified, cluster, simple random, systematic, or like observational study, experiment, something along those lines. One question that's just on exploring data. That could be categorical, in which case it's going to be like a bar graph, a segmented bar graph, something like that. And you're talking about an association. Or it could be quantitative, which is dot plot, stem plot, histogram, box plot. I think I've covered them all. And then chapter 3 is a regression. So it could be one variable or two variables here. Another question is going to deal with probability and sampling distributions. That's going to be the focus. So that's chapters 5, 6, and 7. Could be a z-score, find a probability. Could be a tree diagram, two-way table, Venn diagram, possibly with replacement, without replacement, binomial, geometric, anything along those lines. So that covers 3. One question on inference. This is chapters 8 through 12. I would almost guarantee it's going to be a hypothesis test. Could be a confidence interval, but most likely a hypothesis test with means, proportions, chi-squared, or slope. And then one question that has 2 or more skills. So it's going to be a combination of the things above. It might have probability and inference. So it could be like a probability question, then a confidence interval kind of thing. So that covers what to expect for the first 5 questions. The last one, we know parts A and B are going to be stuff that we've seen before, but then it's going to be investigative after that. There's a chance that question 6 does have some inference, a test, or an interval as the first couple of parts. So the goal of this video is you should be able to look at a question, kind of have a sense of what this is asking and which of these main categories it falls into. I hope that indeed this video is helpful.